This episode is going back to ancient Mesopotamia in order to explore the first known empire in history. By the end of the early dynastic period, at around 2300 BC, there were two peoples living in the southwest of Mesopotamia, the Sumerians and the Akkadians. And although they spoke different languages, both shared similar attributes within their cultures. The first empire would emerge here in ancient Mesopotamia in a time of conflict from these two cultures. So, first it's worth considering what is meant by empire. In this context, we are referring to the conquest and rule not just of other city-states, but also other populations that may have different languages and cultures. Throughout its history, Mesopotamia had been divided into many city-states, and each city-state had a long history of competing with each other for the limited resources the region provided. Land disputes and feuds between them were common and often led to conflict. There was an ever-changing network of rivalries and allegiances as they jostled for position amongst each other. This was the case with the Sumerian city-states of Umma and Lagash. They had experienced a series of conflicts which had lasted for generations. But in their most recent engagement, Lagash had been victorious. However, by the latter end of the 2300s BC, Umma had a new and ambitious ruler, Lugalzagesi. First, he strengthened Umma's military forces, and when he was ready, he attacked Lagash, looting and razing buildings to the ground. But Lugalzagesi didn't stop there. He went on to conquer even more Sumerian kingdoms. He took Kish, Nippur, Larsa. He even took Uruk and made it his new capital. Before long, he ruled the entire region of Sumer. At this point in history, Lugalzagesi controlled more territory than any Sumerian before him. Now, you might think that Lugalzagesi's domain would be remembered as the First Empire. However, he only ruled other Sumerian city-states. So this might be more accurately described as nation building or unification rather than an empire. Although it's probably safe to say that many Sumerians at the time didn't see it that way. However, Lugalzagesi's rule would end in calamity with the emergence of an ambitious Akkadian ruler, known to history as Sargon the Great, also known as Sargon of Akkad. So, who was this Sargon? We know very little of his beginnings. One legend tells us that his mother was a priestess, and when he was born, she was forced to abandon him. She placed him in a basket and floated him down a river. According to the legend, a man then found the baby Sargon and adopted him. This story is very similar to the birth of Moses in the Bible. In fact, stories of babies being abandoned or attempted to be abandoned near rivers does seem to be a popular theme in the ancient world. Other examples of this can be seen with Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, and Cyrus the Great, the first king of Persia. So, back to Sargon. The story tells us that his father was the gardener of the king of Kish, and that Sargon rose to become the king's cupbearer, which was an influential position within the royal court. The name Sargon, or Sharakanu, meaning legitimate king, was certainly not his birth name, and the fact that he called himself this suggests that his succession was not legitimate either. Historians tend to agree that the meaning behind Sargon's origin story was that he came from humble beginnings. The king of Kish, Baba, disappeared from history about the same time that Lugalzagesi attacked Kish. It's probably the case that he died or went into exile during that event. Either way, it seems that the transition of Kish into a vassal state was not entirely successful. Instead, a power vacuum was created that Sargon managed to fill. As mentioned, his position as cupbearer was an influential one in the royal court. So if Sargon really did hold this post, he must have managed to gain enough support to take control, even though he was Akkadian. Then, Sargon marched his army to Uruk and conquered it. He then captured Lugalzagesi and dragged him in a neck stock to the gate at Nippur, which was probably Sargon's next conquest. Lugalzagesi then disappears from history, but it's more than likely that he died there. Sargon then swept across Sumer, capturing cities until he reached the Persian Gulf. He washed his weapons in the sea as a symbolic gesture to mark the eastern boundary of his new empire. But he didn't stop there. He marched his army west, conquering cities as he went. by the 11th year of his reign, he had carved an empire across Mesopotamia. This was the first recorded empire in history. The sources tell us that Sargon's forces was a full-time professional army numbering about 5,400 men, which was probably bolstered by conscripted troops when needed. This was a Bronze Age military force composed of light troops and archers. The sources also tell us that Sargon won a whopping 34 battles throughout his reign, if you can believe that. Each Mesopotamian city-state had a patron god or goddess. However, Sargon was now the ruler of many city-states. Probably for this reason, he decided to found an entirely new city for the capital of his new empire. A city that was not associated with any particular deity, but to the empire itself and its ruler. Sargon did, however, choose Ishtar, goddess of love and war, as his personal deity. She was known as Inanna in the Sumerian language. The new capital was called Akkad in Sumerian and Akkad in Akkadian, hence Sargon of Akkad. However, despite the best efforts of modern archaeologists, the city of Akkad has never been discovered and therefore never excavated. So, how did this empire work? To rule the empire, Sargon removed rulers from city-states and replaced them with men loyal to himself. He would also claim support from the local gods of each city-state. He even appointed his daughter to the position of High Priestess of the moon god Nanna at the Temple of Ur. All legal documents would be written in Akkadian, and it became the official language of the empire. Sargon's subjects were expected to pay their taxes, and he used a high-level bureaucracy and accounting system to make this work. He also standardized weights and measures in order to make trade easier across the empire. Of course, this also made the collection of taxes easier as well. Trading links were also established outside the empire, with city-states such as Damun, Megan and Melchior. But despite all this, rebellions were commonplace across the empire, which needed to be stamped out. As a result, Sargon's empire was highly militarized. This may explain why Sargon had won 34 battles by the end of his reign. We have a record of the Akkadian rulers recorded on the Sumerian Kings list, which I've talked about in previous episodes. According to the Sumerian Kings list, Sargon ruled for 56 years. He was succeeded by his son Ramush. However, the transition of power was not an easy one, because it also seems to be a common feature of this empire that when the ruler died, rebellions erupted across its territories. The city-states would test the mettle of their new ruler in a bid for their independence. However, Ramush was a capable military leader. He was brutal, and he ruthlessly put down rebellion after rebellion. On top of that, he also seems to have campaigned to expand the empire's borders. And according to the sources, he was assassinated in the 9th year of his reign. There has been much speculation about this assassination. Many historians have suggested that his brother Manitushu was behind it. He certainly benefited as he was the successor. Manitushu was older than his brother Ramush. When it comes to successions, it's rare that we see the younger brother take the throne. This must have meant that either Sargon had chosen Ramush as his successor at the expense of Manitushu, maybe he considered Ramush to be the better man for the job, or that somehow Ramush had outmaneuvered his older brother to take the throne after Sargon's death. Either way, it's probably safe to say that Manitushu felt that his younger brother had somehow stolen his birthright. However, with rebellion being such a common occurrence within the empire, there is every possibility it could have been part of a wider plot. Anyway, after the death of Ramush, Manitushu took the throne. He faced the same problems his brother had, more rebellions, which he had to put down of course, and he too campaigned outside the empire. Manitushu reigned for 15 years, and it seems that he may have been assassinated too. Manitushu was succeeded by his son Naram-Sin, and Naram-Sin was a conqueror. As well as putting down revolts, he also campaigned to extend the empire's borders to the furthest they've ever been. Under Naram-Sin, the Akkadian Empire was at its peak. He must have thought a lot of himself because he declared himself to be a living god. We know of this because of a document known as the Victory Stele of Naram-Sin, which has survived the ages. In it, Naram-Sin is depicted wearing a horned helmet. and images of those wearing this type of headdress in Mesopotamia was exclusively reserved for the gods. Not even Sargon went that far. According to the Sumerian kings list, Naram-Sin reigned for 56 years. Naram-Sin was succeeded by his son Shar-Kali-Shari. Once again, the new ruler had to contend with a rebellious empire. However, he ruled for 25 years before his death. But things seem to have completely gone to pot, either towards the end of his reign or shortly after. Because around this time, the Akkadian Empire completely collapses, and collapses fast. So what happened? Some sources suggest there was famine, and the archaeology does support this. Soil samples show that Mesopotamia had been experiencing gradual drought for some time. It is speculated that by the end of Shar-Kali-Shari's reign, irrigation would have become difficult, and crops would have failed and animals perished. This would have been devastating because the empire's economy was based on agriculture. The Sumerian kings list tells us that there was confusion with the succession. After the reign of Shar-Kali-Shari, it asks who was king, who was not king. It then gives us 4 names, all of them ruling for 3 years. This suggests that there were a number of claimants to the throne, and that none of them were able to rise to dominance. And it's probably safe to say that they were unable to deal with rebellions, which we know was a common occurrence of this empire, particularly at a time of succession. Archaeologists have also found evidence that building projects were simply abandoned at this time, suggesting that there was no real government in play as the empire crumbled away. And last but not least, the invasion of the Akkadians. The sources tell us that a people known as the Akkadians came from the mountains, leaving devastation in their path. They had probably been displaced through hunger as a result of the famine that had struck the region. With food sources already stretched beyond its limits, they must have caused devastation as they swept into the already crumbling empire. The Akkadian Empire lasted for about 157 years and is regarded as the first known empire in history. There was an asserted attempt by its rulers to unite Mesopotamia and beyond under one system. However, despite any benefits this may have brought, its subjects rebelled whenever they could. Therefore, ultimately, the empire was held together by strong leadership and military power. The empire rose to great heights in a very short space of time, almost out of nowhere, and fell just as quick. The climatic disaster that took place at its end and its knock-on effects was more than enough to destroy the once powerful Akkadian Empire. Thank you for watching, and if you like my content, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. Have a great day.